Hello there and a very good evening. This is Face the Nation live on TV1. My name is Sonali Wanigabadage. At present, Sri Lanka's parliament is in the process of drafting a new constitution. Now, if this constitution is eventually passed, then it will become the supreme document that governs us. Now, in 1972, we had the first Republican Constitution, followed by the second Republican Constitution in 1978, which is the document that governs us now. It also has with it 19 amendments, with the most recent amendment, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, being passed recently. So are we really ready for a third Republican Constitution? To find out that and more, we are joined by an eminent panel of guests this evening in our studios. Mr. Kandaya Neelakandan, thank you, sir, very much for joining us this evening. He is a senior attorney at law and a luminary in the field of law, especially in constitutional law. Also a board member for the Office of National Unity and Reconciliation, or NUR. Also joining us this evening is Mr. Kushan Dialwis, senior attorney at law and a member of the Public Representations Committee on Constitutional Reform. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Finally, we have Daham Binduheva, attorney at law, also a member of the Liberal Party. Thanks for joining us, Daham. So to start off our opening round, Mr. Kandaya Neelakandan. Sir, my first question to you is, how do you view this process of constitutional making? Do you think there is any chance of this becoming a reality? Are we really ready for a third Republican Constitution?
When we are thinking of making a constitution, we must remember it is not only for the people who are living. We have to think of the people who are living and who are even dead and gone, who will be born. For generations, it must be a document for ages, across ages. But when looking at this in Sri Lanka, one unfortunate thing is, it's a political decision at the end of the day. Political decision is by a majority voice. It is where it leads to exclusion of minorities in the process. Then the question is whether it is a dictatorship by the majority, whether that can be a democratic process. The mechanism is in question. In the past, we have seen, I think, in Sri Lanka, the constitutions have not been successful, mainly because of that. It has been just taken by majority decision. And when I say certain things, I must say, I would like to echo the views of the Tamil-speaking people. And Tamils feel all the Sri Lankan constitutions have been end products of the Sinhala Buddhist nationalism. I think in 1972, even Dr. Colvinata Silva, who has been voicing for parity, admitted that position. Ultimately in politics he had to do. Only exception may be the 13th and 19th amendments. So it is in that process only Tamils are anxious. How we are going to be benefited, whether it will be a successful thing. Only consolation is the President and Prime Minister have given us lot of hopes. I read in the paper that Constitution will be adopted by the Constitutional Council and will be adopted by the people at the referendum, and the Prime Minister has assured the powers of the Provincial Council will not be withdrawn. But he has said it will be implemented even at the grassroots level. I don't know how far it will be benefiting the people, because how far the units will be established. One other salutary thing I've heard is that establishment of a Senate, that is check and chamber. Of course, there again it is established not for offering political offices to defeated candidates. If there can be eminent, capable people where it can represent not just as a majority for the majority vote's sake, but to take into account the views of all the sections of the people. And at the same time, we have level-headed people in the society who don't like to contest election, and who can contribute to the legislative process, and they can act as a checkmate. If that can be done, it will be a good thing.
All right. So one more question. Now, this constitution, this proposed constitution, has had a wide-ranging multi-stakeholder involvement. There has been, it's been called a people's constitution as opposed to the 1972 and the 1978. So don't you feel that those concerns that you just raised will not be faced to that extent?
Let us be optimistic. If that can be achieved, we welcome. But I was referring to the past, where the past constitutions have been made ultimately. Even the Tamils had walked out of the Constitutional Assembly once when they found that they could not succeed or get at least to some reasonable proposals. As I said earlier, Dr. Colin R. De Silva, who made the 1970 Constitution, ultimately admitted it. So if it is not going to be a majority dictatorial attitude, it is going to be a consensus, it is going to be a foundation for establishing a united Sri Lanka with the unity, even the taking into aspirations of all the communities, then of course it will be welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kandaya Neelakandan, Senior Attorney at Law and of course an authority on constitutional law in Sri Lanka. I next move my attention to Mr. Kushanti Alves, also Senior Member of the Bar and a member of the Public Representations Committee on Constitutional Reform. So what were the main challenges that you faced in your role as a member of the Public Representations Committee on Constitutional Reforms? And do you agree with the points that were raised by Mr. Neelakandan with regard to a potential third Republican constitution?
Firstly, I must say the challenges which we mainly faced in the Public Representations Committee on Constitutional Reform were the time constraints, because we had a good response, but what happened was we were appointed on the 22nd of December 2015, and we started our sittings, commenced it somewhere around the 18th of January. We had sittings in Colombo, then we moved to each of the districts, and each of the districts we had 2 days sittings, and thereafter back in Colombo. And we had to, whole of the month of April, we had to prepare the report, and on the 10th of May we presented the report. So there were time constraints. That was the mainly challenging thing which I would say, but it was very heartening to note the interest the people showed in coming forward and giving their views. Certainly if we had more time it would have been better, but then I guess these are things which have to be done. And also there were, then once the committee met, there were diverse views, as one can see from the report, because we did not want to censor or edit, or it was the people's, the public views that we in turn conveyed through our report. So on some matters there are about 3-4 recommendations, because it was not up to for us to decide, it's for the Constituent Assembly, and thereafter the people at a referendum to decide. So we have given our recommendations. As regards to what my good friend Mr. Neelakandan said, as regards to having a new constitution on a consensus base, I would also agree with him, but I would agree with him only to that extent. Beyond that, I feel that it is the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the people of this country must be heard and they must vote on that. If it's not accepted by the people of this country, I don't think any constitution can work. So it must, as much as it must be attractive to the Tamil community and the other communities, it must be attractive, or it must be attractive to the Sinhala community as well, because otherwise the constitution will not see the light of day.
All right. Thank you very much. That was Mr. Kushan Dialvis, a senior attorney at law and also a member of the Public Representations Committee on Constitutional Reform. Last but not least, we have Daham Binduheva, also attorney at law and member of the Liberal Party. Daham, a third Republican constitution, is this the way forward for Sri Lanka? Your time starts now.
Well, I think this whole process started after the January 8th revolution, as we call it, in 2015 with the new election of a new president. And the people wanted a change, especially in the constitution and the executive powers of the president, and how certain functions like the committees, the commissions, and the Constituent Assembly, all these things should be in accordance with the rule of law and how things should work out in a proper country. So this was the expectation of the people, and by the 19th Amendment, to a good extent, to a satisfying amount of an extent, the change has already been given. So credit to that, to the current government and also the factors who promoted for the 19th Amendment and the current status of the Constitution. Coming from that point onwards, then we should look at a solution, a long-term solution for the national issue, specifically mentioning the conflicts of the Sinhala majority and the minorities. And in the new world, in the way we look at the world heritage today, things such as racism or ethnic based decisions are not welcomed, but unfortunately Sri Lanka still has those values very much within the living systems and the villages and the outskirts of this country, maybe even in the cities and maybe up on the highest political level. Still ethnic biasness is still prevalent, and due to this factor we do need a new facet, a new outlook on our constitution. As the Liberal Party and as an individual and a citizen, I believe that we have constructed something out of the experience we've had since independence, and that had come from the 1972 to the 1978 constitution, and our country is functioning. When we consider the South Asian region, I think we are at a good stage, not to the satisfactory level. So then coming from that point onwards, I think what we need is to fine-tune the constitution, because the 1978 constitution has some features which should continue. So things like a referendum, the right of the people to have a say in the lawmaking, the right of the people to elect their own president instead of an elite electing a head of state. And there are many more functions of the constitution which should carry on, like the minority parties get a place with the proportional representative system. Such things should continue. So we should think of fine-tuning the constitutions that we had and the law we have on the long run, because having a new constitution and presenting it to Parliament and the people can make the people totally bounce it out, and we have nothing at all.
So you're saying that we don't need to go for a third Republican constitution. Instead, we should fine-tune our existing documents? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if the new constitution is a product of the current values and the current laws and articles of the constitution with amendments, if the bill is formed as a new document, that is all right. But what I'm saying is, what we have gathered from independence up to today, the essence should be there in the new constitution provided. What we should provide is new solutions and not a new document in all.
All right, thank you very much, Daham. Well, time now to introduce the journalists for this evening's session. On to my immediate right is Nadim Majid. My immediate left, Zulfik Farzan, and to my far left is Charita Fernando. Floor is all yours. We'll start with Nadim.
Thank you, Sonali. I'd like to start with Mr. Neelakandan. Thank you very much for being on the show today, sir. We look at separation of powers is considered a intrinsic, a fundamental of democratic societies. In the past, in our constitutions, people have expressed the view that we've had a situation where the executive has hijacked the legislative branch of government. Now we see a situation where people are calling for the abolition of the executive presidency. Is this a step in the right direction? Now, we went through the report on the Public Representations Committee, and we've seen many people calling for not complete abolition of the executive, but retention of the executive, an executive that is elected by the people rather than by parliament or by a select elite in the Senate. What's the way forward for the executive branch of government in this new constitution? How should we perceive the executive as we embark on this?
I am of the view there should be a clear demarcation of the powers of the three: executive, legislature and judiciary. Of course, whether we should retain the executive presidency is a interesting question to be decided. There are different views expressed. Although some people feel that parliament should be supreme, the executive president must be just like a governor general holding the honorary office position. But there are at the same time, some people think the office of executive presidency has also helped us in certain important issues. There are certain views expressed by even the minority community. Better to have the executive president to maintain a balance. When it comes to parliament, the power struggle there. The party which wants to have the control of the parliament always aim to get the majority votes. And at the same time, when it comes to the executive presidency, we have seen that in the past, the candidate who wanted to be the president was always seeking the support of the minorities also, at least at the election. Even I recall when Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa, after the 2019 also, he was also giving the olive leaves to the minorities, although after that he had changed. And executive presidency may be retained at least with certain powers, because that can be looked into and examined. At the same time, they should also know their limits. Particularly even in the when coming to devolution of powers, the governors who are representing in the provinces are also, I think, creating more problem than the president himself. I think they are trying to be the presidents in the provinces, where they are giving a challenges to the provinces. I think there's a decision of Supreme Court also, judgment of Salim Masouf in one case where he had dealt with it and said they were clear from Article 154(1), the Constitution, while the Provincial Board of Ministers is constitutionally charged with responsibility of aiding and advising the governor in the exercise of his function, the governor is bound in law to exercise his function as a general to rule to act in accordance with such advice, except in so far as he is under the Constitution required to exercise his function. The position of the governor is similar to that of the president under 1972 Constitution. So, the executive can remain where they should. I think the legislature has to remain where it is, and then the judiciary also will be independent. Then only really the spirit of the Constitution can be maintained. That is, I think I am of the view that separation of power is necessary. It should be strictly observed, and there should be no interference in each other, except when it comes to the judiciary will exercise the judicial power, when it comes to the acts of the executives. That's all.
Mr. Dialvis, we currently have a sort of a convoluted system incorporating elements of the Westminster style of government and also of the French Republic, and to a certain extent even the Republic of the United States of America. So there is a bit of blurriness when it comes to separation of powers between the judiciary, the legislature and the executive. In your consultations, when getting public representations, did you ever come across the view that Sri Lanka should go for a tripartite system of governance where there is almost absolute separation between the legislature, the judiciary and the executive, where the executive, instead of the cabinet being a part of the parliament as well, is removed from parliament?
There were some representations made on that matter, but majority of, no, I wouldn't use the word majority, but there were views also expressed like that the executive presidency should remain with sufficient checks and balances. Now, like in the United States, that there are checks and balances on the presidency which are not there in our present constitution. In our present constitution, especially prior to the 19th Amendment also, it was the power, so much power was devolved on the office of president that I guess that's why one of the former presidents said that the only thing he can't do is make a man a woman, a woman a man. So that exactly is the situation with our constitution. So
the reason I asked this question about separation of powers and the executive's influence on the legislature is for this. When you're talking about checks and balances, one of the most important institutions through which these checks and balances on the executive are exercised is the committee system in parliament. You have the standing committees, the Committee on Public Enterprises, Public Accounts, High Posts, etc. All these oversight committees that exercise checks and balances on the executive. How effective can the committee process be when there are members of the executive in those committees? How effective can it be when the people that are supposed to be supervised are doing the supervising, especially given the fact that we don't have a cap on the number of ministers?
No, I agree with you there. The effectiveness is diluted there because, and especially in a Sri Lankan context, I don't think that there should be representatives of the executive in those committees. But the committees are, the decision to have those committees are good, but however, it must be, the formatting of it should be different.
Daham, I'll pose that question to you as well. What's your opinion on members of the executive being in parliament at the same time? Don't you think it would be better to have a system like in the United States we see the system of Senate committees and the congressional committees is very functional. It's open to the public in most cases, and members of the Congress who want to join the executive have to leave their seats in Congress to do so. Do you think that we should go for such a system in Sri Lanka as well?
It's a great step. The step is too vast and too difficult and too long for the Sri Lankan mind to comprehend, because after independence we have got used to a certain governmental and civil process. Now the brains are set, and but ideally when you talk of separation of powers and its influence, ideally what should happen is right at the top it should be very separate, very independent of each other. And when it comes to grassroots level governance, where implementation of the laws and judging and also the lawmaking, whatever the process, when it comes to a village headman's level, a grama sevaka level, that person needs a little bit of all three. So he can share a lot of the three powers within him. But when it comes to a president and a prime minister and a Supreme Court judge, it should be so separate and they should be so far away from each other. That is the ideal format.
We had one more point on this. On the executive presidency, I am of the view, once an executive president is elected, even from a political party, he should give up the alliance of political party, he should remain independent. And better to have only one term for the president. Once he become the president, he should be president of Sri Lanka, not the president of any party.
Mr. Neelakandan, do you think that the president should be elected by the people or by parliament?
I think he should be elected by the people.
By the people in a national election.
We had one more thing, on, if you don't mind, you want this executive committee, the committee stage. Also, as you said, the ministers should not be part of the committee. They can be invited. and they can make presentations. So we find it in the district development committees all over the island. The ministers from those areas go and sit there. They dominate. They don't allow the provincial ministers and the provincial administrators to take active decision because they are going around and dictating.
But that can be changed by simply amending the standing orders of Parliament.
Yes, that's right.
You don't have to go for a constitutional amendment to change that. That can be changed.
A number of things can be done by even administrative arrangements.
Mr. Neelakandan, there is a view that the present constitution has failed to sort of mold a Sri Lankan identity. How optimistic are you that a new constitution could be more inclusive and pluralistic and help a Sri Lankan identity?
Not I myself, I think all are hoping it should be all inclusive and cover the situation. There are a number of, we have at least the lessons we have experienced. We have to think of those things and correct ourselves. And now we have got the opportunity, now it's the Constitutional Council. It has to make a new constitution. It can't amend the constitution. Correct, sir?
Sorry?
The Constitutional Council can't amend the constitution. It makes a new constitution.
Constituent Assembly.
Assembly. They call it Constitutional Council. Paper says.
No.
Maybe. Anyway, Constituent Assembly. Or
Constituent
Council. They can't amend the constitution. It has to be a new constitution.
Mr. Diarvis, during your consultations with the public, how much of importance do you think Sri Lankans in rural areas give to a new constitution with their day-to-day battles, livelihood issues? Do you think this is something they see as absolutely necessary?
I can speak only of the people who came forward, or the people who made representations. They were, of course, they felt that there was a need for a new constitution and that there was a change in the structure, basically reduction of the powers of the president, basically that was there. But like we said earlier, that there was some of them were for the presidency to remain with some executive powers, whereas another recommendation was only to have a figurehead presidency like the former Governor General or former president under the 1972 constitution. So of the people who participated, they were very, I would say, interested in the process, and they made a variety of suggestions from various aspects, of course, which included their day-to-day problems as well. That's why, in addition to preparing this Public Representations Committee report, there is another report that is being made. That is the Public Grievance Report. That is where the grievances did not amount to constitutional amendments, but that is another report that is being prepared by the committee. That will be also submitted to the Constituent Assembly, but that will not amount to any constitutional amendment. So I would say there was a lot of enthusiasm among the people who made representations to the committee and about the constitutional amendment. Main thing what they were harping was the necessity to have basically peace in this country and then to go forward from there.
Mr. Neelakandan,
Yes.
you were a bit critical about governors. So are you suggesting that from the new reforms that the post of governor should be removed?
No, they can be there. Because they can exercise only the powers given to them by the constitution without trying to be the president of the province. They are trying to be the executive in the provinces. Now, for example, I have seen the governor of the northern province, a nice person, I would say, personally a nice man. But he did not do certain things. He organized a seminar on the investment, which he could have spoken to the provincial chief minister, arranged with the ministers, and did it. So he represents as a ceremonial office, except that he had to exercise certain powers when he coming to appoint the ministers, and he represents the president of the country in the province. we have certain powers. That is why I refer to the judgment of the Supreme Court, where Justice Salim Masood has clearly explained what is the role of the governor and what is the role of the board of ministers.
Charita, I think we have time for one more question before going into
May I go back to one more question you asked about the people's participation?
Yes.
I like to say, I have been attending a number of meetings with the civil societies, and also with that last I attended a meeting of the Congress of Religions, where the learned members of the Buddhist clergy, Catholic clergy, Christian clergy from the majority community, they are level-headed, they understand, and they are very broad-minded. So really I appeal to them, you all must take these ideas to at the grassroots level. People must be taught what is federalism. People think the federalism is separation. So those things, I think people, the village level, they don't understand. When the campaign is made, you give federalism, country will be separated, or you give division of power, right? It will be merged with India. That sort of misrepresentation is going because the people in the villages are not educated. I think even I would say even the program, your television program, in the Singular Tamil media, can do some service. You can get these leaders to come and explain. They are very broad. I have seen number of the lawyers, friends. In Colombo, we have got number of level-headed people who will be prepared to come accept a reasonable constitution. I think the problem can be solved. But when it comes to issue, some political leaders raise this cry, and the people are misled. So if that can be done, it will be very useful.
So what you're saying is there's no proper communication.
Proper communication, I would say. Another thing, one more thing I would like to add. I have seen, I read the Tamil papers and English papers. Unfortunately, I can't read Sinhala papers. What is said in Tamil paper, there are certain things happening where the people in the northeast are suffering. That is only published in the Tamil papers and Tamil media. That is not sufficient. I think majority people don't know really what is happening. Some people, when they come to Jaffna, they realize it, but all don't come. I think there's a lack of communication. People must be educated. I think even if you are going for the national referendum, I think that is very important.
All right, thank you very much. With that, we're going for a short commercial break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We're in conversation with Mr. Kandaya Neelakandan, President's Counsel Mr. Kushan Dialwis, and Attorney at Law Daham Bindu Heva. Let's start off this round with Daham. Daham, do you believe that women's rights needs to be focused more in a possible third Republican constitution?
It has already.
If not, what are the main areas that you think we should focus on?
There is a suggestion that you stick on a percentage, and you have a mandatory percentage of women representation at parliamentary and other levels of politics and governance. Without going to that level, what we should do is to encourage. We should create the atmosphere for a lady to come up and take leadership in this country. Ideally,
how do we do that?
Well, it's like this. The Sri Lankan mentality is, I've told this many times with my friends. Our Sri Lankans will be ready to bow down to a lady and make a lady a queen, but the Sri Lankan mind might not listen to the conscience of a lady.
So do you think we can effect this change merely by changing a constitution?
It's the attitude that we should change.
How do we go about doing that?
Well, that's a lot of social activism. And that's a subject outside policy and politics also. The problem with having a percentage at the ground level politics is that the ground level politicians are scared that the percentage of female representation will be filled with wives and other relatives of established politicians. So there is a serious concern of having this percentage, but we should find another mechanism to get ladies encouraged to actively participate in the political process. That is, of course, should start from the school level.
So,
My friend Diane has forgotten Madam Srima Bandaranaike.
Yeah.
Huh? She was leading it.
She was leading, and also the thing is this, Sri Lanka is a country where you had an Attorney General who was a lady, a Chief Justice who was a lady, a Prime Minister who was a lady, a President who was a lady. So ladies have a say in this country, whatever said and done. Ladies have a lot of say in this country. It's that attitude, the belief should be given to the ladies.
so in order to shift this attitude, do you think we need to think of then reform in the education sector? If so, should this be reflected in the Constitution?
I don't think Constitution should. A Constitution is a supreme law. It should be based without any form of extra attention being given to any caste, religion, sex, or whatever sort of classification. You cannot tend a Constitution onto a classification and make one party. You can't dictate over a person's classification.
Article 12.1, right to
Yeah.
equality.
Yeah.
So then what's the solution, Dham?
Solution is education.
I
All right.
would say, Sonali, that while I agree with the Ham about the necessity to change attitudes, till that happens, I feel that there must be in local government and other electoral systems a certain percentage left for ladies, because what happens is otherwise they never get elected, or very few get elected.
That should come from the parties.
So
but even
you're
if the
advocating for a
parties-
quota system.
I'm advocating a quota system till the education systems and the change of attitude, because change of attitude cannot be done overnight. So it will take some time. So till then, I think, or at least, that there should be a quota system. I strongly advocate a quota system.
One more thing is electoral process. It is a strain for a lady to campaign in election and contest and come. So if the electoral process is also dignified, I think really more lady can come in.
Mr. Dialvis, my second question is to you. What are the shortcomings on the part of our existing constitution which we need to get rid of? Your time starts now.
As the shortcomings, I would say one is too much power has been reposed on the executive. I believe there should be more checks and balances and on that matter. That is one of the main things. Then also, as regards to the 13th Amendment. 13th Amendment is, one would say, neither here nor there. Basically, 13th Amendment is, I would say, was forced down the throats of the Sri Lankan people. I don't accept the 13th Amendment as being something which came from the Sri Lankan people. I would also say I just can't understand how the 13th Amendment that did such violence to the existing constitution could have gone through without a referendum. Because it created provincial councils, power was devolved from the center on certain provincial lists, then you get the concurrent list, then the reserve list, but there was no constitution, no referendum. And the majority community was not happy, the minority community was also not happy. Ultimately, I don't think it satisfied anyone. So I think I'm not trying to give a solution to this problem. What I'm saying is, you ask me the shortcomings. I feel that the 13th Amendment as it is flawed.
So you're saying that power should be centralized and that there should be no devolution of power to the provinces? Is that what you're saying?
My view, of course, is that basically that the these issues, majority of the issues raised by the minority communities can be administratively addressed.
Through centralization of power?
By giving the minorities the right to do their work, whether it's in Matara or Tangol or Kurunagala in their own language, give them whatever rights all over the country. Because what I'm saying, it's more administrative matter. Because I would say that the provincial councils are a white elephant now. What is the Southern Provincial Council, Western Provincial Council, Northwestern Provincial Council? We have ministers, we have now. If it was to address the north and east or the northern problem, it's one thing. But here now we have a sort of, this small country has been made into separate, divided into provincial councils.
So what's the
alternative? At the moment serves no purpose
What's the alternative
at all.
then?
Alternative, there can be, there can be suggestions, various suggestions. My view is that I am for a unitary state.
So the provincial councils are there in this unitary state, but you still say that there should be little devolution of power and centralization.
Yes, I am for that. I am against any unit of devolution of power that is based on race, religion or caste.
All right, thank you.
That matter. So I feel that there must be central control, and I'm totally against doing away with the concurrent list.
All right, thank you very much, President's Counsel, Mr. Kushan Dialwis, for your thoughts and observations. Finally, I come to Mr. Kandaya Neelakandan. Sir, do you agree or disagree with what Mr. Dialwis said with regard to devolution of power and provincial councils? Do you think that power should be vested in the central government?
I fully disagree with my friend Kushan for many reasons. First is, I would say you can't call it a white elephant. The problem is, when the devolution of power was brought in by the 13th Amendment, it was not properly implemented. I would quote what a learned, respected person, Mr. K.C. Kamalasabesan, Attorney General, who had served during that time, has said in his book. He says, even though the government structure has been effectively altered by 13th Amendment and the Provincial Council Acts, the reluctance at the national level to effectively devolve power to the Provincial Council has caused heavy financial burden on the country, with a consequential increase in the lobby against the system itself. This is aggravated by the prevailing situation in the northern eastern provinces, and there is no doubt these two enactments were introduced mainly for these two provinces. The implementation part, I have a personal knowledge. I had the opportunity of serving in the Finance Commission of Sri Lanka for 3 years during when Madam Sandrika Bandaranaike was the president. The Finance Commission was given the responsibility of allocating the finances given to be the provinces. When it comes to the Finance Commission was not allowed to take decision. I think Secretary of the Treasury, Dr. Yasundara will come. He will come and say, no, President wanted this. Central government control. But there were number of useful things we could persuade them to do it. For example, during that time, Hambantota was a very backward area, and southern province chief minister came and said Hambantota schools are not properly looked after. Likewise, northern province government again came and said Mannar area. So like that, so we could do the balancing and doing the allocation. We had to persuade. Even then, we found it impossible to persuade the treasury to do it, because he says no, president says this. And not only that, we have read recently, even after the new president came to power, he had a meeting with the provincial council chief ministers. They opposed taking away their powers. They wanted more powers. So why it is said that the provincial councils are not benefited? Number of things can be done if they are allowed to do, because they know the problems in each provinces. I know I have gone to the eastern province. The number of things are being done. Okay, whenever the government cooperated, I would say there the governor was doing a very diplomatic work. He diplomatically is getting on well with the provincial administration, and I would say, okay, better to have the 5 regional councils. Have 1 regional council for northeast, and because regions are different requirements. Every approach, every requirements of the regions are different. So why don't we do that? Why don't in the new constitution have 5 regional councils? And my friend said, not only on the basis of religion and race, not very geographically we are doing it. Northeast, even the different communities have similar problems, and likewise in the skill countries, different problems. So they are living together. There is identity there, and in the south there is a different problem. So at the EC, without Colombo central to control, and now what is happening is because the central interferes in everything, even in small matter, where the provincial council can appoint a principal, central government is interfering unnecessary. A provincial administration will know better. They have no say, and through this party system, ultimately the president of the party controls the entire provincial council system. That is where I think better to have the devolution of powers. I would attach say the lands and police powers also should be given. You can have a check and have the control. The president can do that, and there can be a police commission. There can be a system, and it is been done in other countries. And it is after all, it is SWR Bandaranaike first who advocated the federal system.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kandaya Neelakandan, for your thoughts. I open the floor to the journalist. Charika, let's start with you.
Yes, Mr. Neelakandan, I would like to ask you, to make the present reconciliation process successful or sustainable, what would you like, what changes would you like in the constitution?
I would say just making provision in the constitution is itself not enough. It is the implementation. I think even the present provision in the constitution can be effectively done. At the same time, if you give the powers to the provinces, now the people in the north and east are complaining that they are not being looked after. For example, in the north, why the army is still remaining in the lands, and although the provincial chief minister, even the governor was trying to persuade them to leave, they say no, army is refusing. Army can't take this decision. Political power is not in the army. And recently there was a new police quarters or police office was opened by the Prime Minister. Despite that, private lands are occupied by the police. I'll give an example. You know, the first one of the hotels which was in Jaffna was the Ashok Hotel in front of hospital, that Mahatma Gandhi Veedi, huge building. That has been taken by the police. Still police has got the new home. Even then they don't want to give it. That can be repaired. Tourism can be developed. Only 1 or 2 hotels are there, good hotels. So if the people must be allowed to feel that they can enjoy their own land. Another problem, I know personally, I have been to Jaffna on our religious services. There were 34, they call it welfare centers, but these are like camps, where the people were kept, mainly the people from Maileti area, who were fishermen. They said they can't give the Maileti because the army is refusing it. Army should not be allowed to decide. The political power should decide.
Mr. Neelakandan, you talked about the provincial councils. Mr. Dialvis was talking about the provincial councils being a white elephant. Now we've seen in Sri Lanka at numerous instances where provincial councils have been sort of dysfunctional when it comes to addressing certain issues, when it comes to schools, not specifically in the northern province, but in the southern province, in the western province, in Sabaragamuwa, in Nuva, in Wayamba. We've seen problems where provincial councils are unable to deal with problems, and the central government has been compelled to step into this thing. You mentioned that devolution, this kind of devolution happens in other countries as well, but the focus there is, in these other countries that you mentioned, the focus of devolution is the efficiency of running the state rather than political aspirations of a specific community. Thereby, don't you think that in Sri Lanka, devolving powers to, as the Prime Minister proposed recently, or as the Prime Minister said they've reached an agreement in Parliament, to the local government level would be far more effective than at a provincial level?
I will not say it is necessary to devolve powers to the local authorities like town council, Pradesh Sabha, because in small matters you can allow them to.
But that's the first point of contact between the people and representative democracy.
Small matters you can allow them to do that things. But here again, in Sri Lanka, the main thing is the certain administration work has to be allowed to be done by the officers, public servants, not the minister to interview. For example, if it comes to many schools, people have to run to the ministers to get admission to the school. I see that education minister and health minister are fighting over the admission of children of the doctors. All those matters should be allowed at the provincial level. And if they are going to interfere, the problem there, I know, in the provinces, the main problem is the provincial directors of education have no say. Here it is all controlled by the centre here. And they must give the freedom to discipline. Then
but if an individual or a community within a province feels that they are being hard done by the provincial authorities, where can they seek redress?
No, they can seek the relief, they can go by writ. If they are not, it has happened. And Court of Appeal has issued writ against the provincial council if they don't act correctly with administrative actions. Why don't they allow the officers to act independently according to the law? Law is there to have a check. And here, without central government, I think what has happened in this country, you have to run to the president for everything. We have come to that.
Mr. Dialvis, where do you stand on this matter, on devolution? Do you think that devolution to the local government level, as is being talked about in political circles now, would be more meaningful than provincial council level?
I would say so. Yes, I would agree with that.
And your premise for saying so?
That is because I would say that they are closer to the people. Because I feel that especially this, what has happened is when we talk about the devolution of power, ultimately we all end up with the northeast issue or the ethnic issue. But now if one is to take Sri Lanka as a unitary state, and if the power is to go to the people, whether the person is in the north or south or east or west, I think at the local government level, and also on top of that with the district development councils where there should be basically the cabinet ministers as well as the local government heads, where they could take some meaningful decisions which relate directly to the people. Because now
the reason that I asked this question, one of the most contentious issues when talking about devolution of powers is police powers and land powers. It's used as a catchphrase by various political by parties on both sides of the divide when talking about the 13th Amendment or when talking about devolution. It's either we shouldn't give police powers and land powers, or we should give police powers and land powers. I'd like to focus specifically on police powers because recently, this is not in the north and the east actually, this is in Matale. I met with several local government representatives and we're talking about the idea of devolution to the local government level. And one of these former local government representatives, because there are no local government bodies at present, actually proposed the establishment of district level police forces so that police, like you mentioned public services, the police is also a public service, so that the police are closer to the people and are more accountable to the people. Where do you stand on that?
I have a bit district level.
He said that the police should also be devolved and decentralized.
Yeah, but not the police force. Basically, I think that police power should be with the center, because for the simple reason, sometimes as if the police powers are devolved, even the classic case is if a person is charged for a certain crime, the police force of that province can go up only to the boundary of that particular province, and then thereafter they have no jurisdiction beyond that.
But the system works fairly efficiently in other countries. For example, let's take the state of New York in the United States. Just state you have the NYPD, which is split into several precincts, what they call precincts. You have 12th precinct, 56th precinct, etc., etc. And each of these almost individual police units handle specific areas of the state. Don't you think that such delegation makes for more effective management?
But we have to look at it in the context of what has been happening in this country. We have just finished a 30-year-old ethnic war. It was against one of the most ruthless terrorist organizations this ethnic war was concluded. And in the event, now for instance, we'll say some attack happens in, we'll say, in the Colombo or something, and thereafter if it's linked to some kind of terrorism, and if that culprit goes into an area controlled by, we say, goes into the northern area,
but you can always have a central police force that deals with crimes like terrorism.
These will lead to unnecessary clashes. Why create unnecessary clashes? There is a police commission, the police is now functioning properly. Why do you want to? Because one has to remember that we can't just now, even my learned friend was talking about the withdrawal of the army from the north. It can't be done. Right. Then if the southerners also want the army to be withdrawn from the southern areas, are we to dump them in the sea?
Mr.
These are national army. We must have an armed presence there, because there may be sleeper LTT cells there. There must be surveillance there. We must ensure that there will be no terrorism that will raise its head again in the north or in the east. There must be constant surveillance. Army must be there. True enough, now I am told about 33,000 acres were under the army. Now it has been brought down to 10,000. It's gradually being done. But there must be a strong military presence in the northern in view of what has happened in the past.
Mr. Nilakandan, you disagree with this statement?
I fully disagree.
On what
I know, I am surprising my learned friend. This is the problem we have in this country. We are talking of reconciliation is becoming more difficult because of imagination. You know, my learned friend is referring to the devolution coming to ethnic issue. That imagination. You know, don't give anything to Tamil, don't give it, the Tamils are tigers, that is attitude.
That is totally wrong. I never said Tamils are tigers. That's, I think,
imagine that imagination is there. So, but then why the army, the LTTs are all the time.
I have to agree with Mr. Dialvis didn't make that specific statement.
That is their usual accusation, because if someone, a Sinhalese speaks about something about the army or something, he is accused of that.
Because, now may I say this, my learned friend opposed the diversion to provinces. Now, but he wants the diversion to the rural town, the town councils. I don't see any logic. And having the armies in the north is only creating all the problems in this country. Now, army is not controlling the LTT. You don't want LTT to come arise. There will be a proper diversion of power. You all must make the younger generation to believe that they can live in this country. If you all are going to do the same exercise again, now you all are creating problems. Now it happened with the standardization of school. How the university students were deprived of their due places. We can see the history.
No, sir, but going forward, sir.
Forward. That's why, to look at the reconciliation. What I am saying is, that is, you all must teach all the people to understand. Having the devolution of power is not separation, and having the army to north and east only will not separate the country is meaningless. It creates more problems. I would say with having the army in the north, you can't talk of reconciliation. They are creating the anti-feeling among the people, and so in the police force, you are talking the police force. What about India? They are having the state police, central province police, and they can have an interarrangement.
Mr.
So
Neelakandan,
imagination is
how does national security then feature in this
So
whole
you can
equation?
have an arrangement with the central police system, with the state police system, and all come under one IEP. What is happening in India, a big country is it like India. People can't commit crime and run to Andhra Pradesh. Now we can't say people will commit crime in Colombo and run to Jaffna and take shelter. And you don't need the army there too. You need the proper army here.
Dam, I want to bring you in on this conversation on devolution. You've been pretty silent this time. Where do you stand? Where does the party stand? Your party stand on
The
this
party
matter?
stands that the 13th Amendment is sufficient. And also, personally, looking at the separation of powers issue, there is a twofold necessity. One is the livelihood grievance of the minorities, practicalities of not being able to use their mother language in government departments when they go here and there. That's the livelihood grievance. And there is also a dignity issue of being a minority. So the elite and the knowledgeable, the educated, they strike more on the dignity issue, while the people who doesn't have houses, who are living in forest reserves without sufficient water or sanitation, today they have to fight with their own governments to dig a well to get water, to their own officials, own people. So there are two levels of problems in the north. One is a political necessity for dignity, and the other is a livelihood grievance, where people are surviving every day to live.
So where do you
Nothing.
think?
I think we need to
Mr.
give an
Prashant
opportunity
Gyalis,
to...
I want to bring your attention to a note that was mentioned in the report on public representation, and I quote, the concept of Grama Rajya Sabha, and it goes on to say, the political power must be devolved to the lowest possible level, namely the village. In the report, is your committee suggesting that we have the local government, urban councils, municipal councils, Pradesh Sabhas, to add another structure of governance?
No, I think if you read further, I think we have brought that out, but it is for the Constituent Assembly to decide how to structure it. But this Grama Rajya concept is something which came up from a fair amount of people who felt that will be the closest power base to the people, and that would be something which would be necessary for the development of the country with the mass direct participation. So therefore, the Grama Rajya concept, we are not certainly suggesting that to have about 4 or 5 tiers of government. But
Sarita?
Yeah, Mr. Neelakandan, I would like to ask you about the topic that we were talking about earlier, about the military presence in the north, leaving aside all the accusations. In a natural disaster, it's the military that is the first responder, right, in any area. So when you raise concerns saying, or accusations saying the presence of military aggravates problems, how do you think the southerners would look at your viewpoint in terms of reconciliation? Because anyone could take it up as a extremist view. Because how do you go for reconciliation if you on a stand like that?
What do you mean by natural disaster?
Now, say floods,
Yeah.
or even during the tsunami. So, there have been situations
Okay,
where
there can be flood not only in northern province, it can be in
Yeah.
the province of each of other 8 provinces. So why you are not having the armies in the private lands there? Here you have private land. That is the point I am making.
but they have been releasing it gradually.
No, releasing whose land? Not the state land. There are enough state land. They can have the army camp in the state lands. Why they are taking the private land and they are enjoying? They are doing businesses. They were running the tourist hotel. I think now new president when he came to, he was annoyed. And they are enjoying. They have the control. And my point is, political power can't. Ministers say, president say, we are arranging them to hand out the land. Then they say, army is objecting. How army can object? That is my point.
Are you referring to the
Not only
Palali?
that, but one more point. Here is the problem we are having in the northeast is, now army is building Buddhist BRAs. They are doing it. Their army is the army of the government of Sri Lanka, national. Right? If the Buddhists want to have the BRS built for their worshipping, that is different. I don't object. Right? But here the government arm should not get involved in it. You all must go and see Jaffna and Northeast. Otherwise, I repeat, the problems are created. By the way, as long as the army is there, you can't build up a reconciliation in this country. Whatever constitution you give, even you merge the North and East and give, the problem will not be solved. Unless on ground situation, the people are given the assurance, they also can live freely like the citizens of this country.
Mr. Dialvis.
If not, one moment. If
Yes.
not for the army, there won't be a chief minister in the northern province, nor will there be a provincial council in the northern province.
Why?
It is because the Sri Lankan army defeated the LTT, you have a chief minister, and there is a provincial council functioning thanks to our military forces.
May I respond to that?
Sure.
If not for the racial attitude taken by the successive governments up to 83, our youth and generation would have not have been killed. They had to take to youth, and it is a matter of record. Ultimately, in 1983, even the people's representatives were sent out of the parliament by J.R. Jayawardena government, and it is recorded. Even single authors have written and said when the MPs, moderate MPs of the TNA were sent out of parliament after the 6th Amendment, and Prabhakaran stepped into their shoes and took control. So I think you all must take the responsibility. You all created this problem.
So how do you propose reconciliation
No, I
must be
don't-
achieved?
Because I said
I disagree with my learned friend that there was that it was created in 1983. Prabhakaran was active way before 1983.
because of the problem, they started from 77, Mr. Alvis.
Daham, as a young attorney at law, how do you see the way in which we could create an attitudinal shift in the youth of this country in ensuring real reconciliation, in ensuring that the hearts and minds of a wounded citizenry are healed?
Well, actually, I'm in a process. And I know certain facts of the Northern East because I have my friends who are actively involved in politics. And young politicians, we have a clique. We have an understanding amongst each other. We have an informal communication. Say, for instance, there is a group of 30 people who doesn't have access to water, and they have to walk 3 hours to collect water. So what we do is we collect some money, send a bicycle, so that they can grab the water and collect the water. So we have an understanding. The future is good, but the thing is, the past was bad. And going back,
how do we move forward? How do we not keep harping on the past, and how do we move on into a brighter future?
well, there is a necessary political solution needed. There is a necessary political solution needed because the Sinhalese Buddhist fragments of the majority, they have a fear. As Mr. Neelakandan said, they have a fear. It's a psychological fear that when you demarcate the Northern East and when you federalize the country, then the Sri Lankan Sinhalese Buddhists think that the country is divided, and on one side there are the minorities, on the other side there's the majority. People, as in their own conscience and their intelligence, they see a separation. Technically, politically, and administratively, there won't be much of a separation as of states, but it's just a separation of administration. But the people won't see it in that way. So that aspect we have to address by educating the Sinhalese public. And also getting them to see what's happening in the northern and eastern provinces. Tell them the problems that these people are going through, administrative problems, day-to-day functions that these people are going through.
Mr. Dialvis, how do you respond to that?
Yes, one thing I must say about is now this question of the North and East merger. I must say that when the Public Representations Committee went to the East, there were diverse views among the three communities. The Tamil people, they wanted a merger with the North. the Sinhala people were totally opposed to it. The Muslim people were also opposed to it, but a certain segment of the Muslim people were willing to consider, provided a separate council is created in the southeast. So the question of this north and east being spoken together, I am totally against. Because the east, the Tamil people do not even, they are not even 50%. When you take the, I think the largest community living in the eastern province is a Muslim community, if I am not mistaken. Any event, the Tamil, the Muslim and the Sinhala communities are certainly over 50%. And if the north and east is merged, there is a dilution of the Sinhala and Muslim communities. And also, what is this basis of the north and east being merged? On what basis?
Mr. Diavis, do you think that a referendum should be held in the eastern province, asking the question, do you wish to merge with the northern province? Since you say that a majority of the populace in the east is against the Sinhalese and Muslim community.
Provided it's a fair and free referendum, it does not matter.
Mr. Neelakandan, do you think that the eastern province should be allowed to have a referendum on whether it should merge or not?
No, I will start with this. I think J.R. Jawatra, the president of the or leader of the UNP, had put his signature in 1987 recognizing that northern and eastern provinces have been areas of historical habitation of Sri Lankan Tamil-speaking people who have at all times hitherto lived together in this territory with the other ethnic groups. Having said that, I like to say this also, even our respected Judge Sarath Silva, when he gave a judgment demerging the east, what is the basis? They said that if eastern province Tamil is 40%, if we merge, Tamil becomes 60%. So the attitude is this: the attitude that Tamils can't be majority even in a province. That is the attitude taken. But I must say at the same time, there are people who are prepared to recognize.
But Mr. Neelakandan, Mr. J.R. Jawatra, that was in 1978.
87.
But in 87,
yeah.
What Mr. Kushan Dialvis is saying is the current reality is that the majority of the population in the eastern province does not want to merge with the northern province.
Who is voicing on behalf of them? This committee, they go, and I am told.
So thereby, in order to have a fair voice, do you think that, don't you think that a referendum would be...
Even the people were giving evidence before all these commissions. Army around the place. And
but don't you think that if a provincial referendum was held...
It's not an independent view. And I would say, even there was a...
No, on the question of a provincial referendum, do you think that the people in the eastern province should be given a referendum to decide whether they want to join?
I want to come to that. There was an all-party conference in 2006. The majority, consisting of people, respected people like R.K.W. Gunasekara, Dr. Rohan Pereira, Dr. Jambadi Vikramatna, Mrs. Vikramasinghe, all these made a good recommendation. And they point out what has all these has resulted in the minorities being sidelined and becoming alienated from Sri Lankan step. As a initial effort to redeem this situation, power sharing mechanism is important, and they recommended to merge the north and east and have it for 10 years and then have a referendum. It's a matter of record, it's in black and white.
So you're saying it should be merged and then you should have a referendum 10 years after the merger?
Yeah, that's what they recommended, the majority group.
Equally respected people like Mr. H.L. De Silva, President's Council, and Mr. Manohara De Silva, President's Council, they differed in this view as well.
They took
Mr. Gominda Astri. No, so my learned friend is banding words saying extremists. So I also
extreme views.
Extreme views. Okay. Extreme views. So these are also extreme views, merging the north and east.
Mr. Dialvis, the need for judicial reform has been harped on continuously. We face a lot of laws delays in our present system, justice system. Mr. Dialvis, how do we overcome these issues? These are day-to-day realities that litigants have to go through, lawyers also have to go through on a daily basis. How do we circumvent this, and how will the constitutional reform process look into this?
One thing was what we found that the bottlenecks were mainly in the appellate system of court. So we have recommended the expansion of the Court of Appeal to 35 judges, and for them to sit in the provinces as well, and also the Supreme Court to be expanded to 15. So those were two steps which we have taken, and also there are certain other administrative steps which are of course not in the constitution, like necessary amendments to the Civil Procedure Code or the Criminal Procedure Code to take away the delays. And also I been an advocate of having a very stringent cost regime. Cost regime is that you file a frivolous case or you take up a frivolous defense, you have to pay costs,
Right.
a heavy cost, not what is in the archaic Civil Procedure Code or that the archaic cost regime in the Civil Procedure Code, which amounts to a very little sum. Because what happens is in so many foreign jurisdictions, it is the cost regime. Now, because we sometimes come up with very I'm a civil lawyer mainly, so absurd situations where a borrower from a bank denies the very existence of the bank in his answer. I'm just taking a very simple example. And then the bank has to, in evidence, produce the banking license as well. Here he has taken the loan from the bank and he's saying, he's challenging the existence of the bank. So, no, what I say is if one has a stringent cost regime for each day of litigation, there is a possibility of the number of cases being limited as well as being expeditiously disposed of.
Right. What about the fundamental rights?
On the matter, you don't mind, I would like to add, I fully agree with my learned friend on that aspect, but I would like to add, there have been number of law reforms suggested for years. That is not properly implemented. Again, we have to blame the political leaders. If amendment to the Supreme Court is there in a form, it has not been implemented. Then another important thing, Registration of Title Act, which was badly drafted in 1988 with all the loopholes, and Bhasan made a recommendation in 84 amendment, that accepted, not amended. If the Registration of Title Act is brought in, most of the civil cases which are involved in the land cases can be disposed of, because the title system is the perfect. Other aspect is the language problem. Now, for example, I am having a case decided by the Northern Provincial Council where other party has appealed to the Supreme Court. Last 20 months it has not been taken up because the briefs are in Tamil. We don't have a bench with Tamil speaking judges. When Justice Salim Masud retired in December 2014, then only Chief Justice, and I must say Justice Eva Varasundara, she said she can understand Tamil. She was here in the case, but we need one more judge. Representatives were made to have one Tamil speaking judge. I think if they can do some remedy, I don't want to, we can just suggest on the memo, this I think Bhasan must have made a representation to have a remedy. This is the one other thing I think affecting the Northeast people. Not even, I know a number of cases from Kalmune and number of cases are pending, where the decrees can't be executed because of the Supreme Court can't take up, and they are doing translation.
Sorry, Daham, as a young lawyer, where do you stand on judicial reforms? What can be done in the process of constitution making, what can be done to address the need for judicial reforms?
Constitution actually, what the constitution can do is look into the constitute of the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal and the provincial high courts and their functions, but the problems lays down in administration, where you can go into primary courts procedure and also the mediation boards, and then there is a lot of procedure where you can bring in more of technology into the court's process. So these are functions which are not in the constitution, because as Mr. My learned friend and senior President Council told that you can only by the constitution change the constituency and the main functions of the superior courts as it is, but the problem lies in the other courts and the other functions, the procedures and the administrative issues.
Our senior journalist Faraz Shaukat Ali sends a message from the UK. He says, according to the ministry website, each year 900,000 cases are carried forward to the following year. If courts can work 2 hours more each day, the backlog can be reduced by up to 40%. So what do you think of that suggestion?
As my reference said, it is up to the administration system. They can do that. Of course, as Kusan said, they can increase the number of judges and having different concepts. And I think some people have made representations to have these appellate courts at the provincial level also. So it can be looked at. If necessary, the constitution can be amended, at least making a provision, if necessary, to a point. At least.
Yes.
What about fundamental rights jurisdictions? I mean, right now it vests with the Supreme Court, which means that even an aggrieved party from Hambantota or Vakare has to come all the way to Halsdorf to file that fundamental rights application and have it heard, which will take several years. So shouldn't we also then think of devolving the Supreme Court's authority, or in the alternative appointing new courts to hear fundamental rights cases?
Actually, in our report we have suggested that, and also when it's Supreme Court there is no appeal. So we have suggested that fundamental rights jurisdiction be vested in the Court of Appeal with a right of appeal to the Supreme Court.
Right.
As well as now there is a 30-day period to file papers. We have said that should be taken off, because 30 days is insufficient. Unless it's a continuing offence or something. Sometimes objections are raised on the basis of the being time barred. So that also we have asked, we have recommended that be taken off, as well as vest the fundamental rights jurisdiction in the Court of Appeal, and there is a right of appeal to the Supreme.
They can consider allowing the Court of Appeal to sit in the provinces.
Yeah, that is also one of the recommendations, because now at the moment the appellate work is done by the civil appellate high courts, and they are in the, anyway they sit in the districts or the provinces. So
Sharika? Mr. Diaris, on the PTA, since the war has ended now, what aspects has the PRC looked at in amending the...
There was a division of views. I think majority of the committee, as well as they recommended that the PTA should be taken away. I was of the view that if the PTA should remain, or if the PTA is to be taken out, some other enactment which would safeguard the the sovereignty and also the to ensure that the homeland security is ensured, is brought in. Now, for instance, even places, countries like the United States of America, United Kingdom, they too have their acts. So if one finds the PTA harsh or too, but there must be another act, because we can't just walk away. Now, with what we can't just live in like Alice in Wonderland. We must see what's happening around. There is an active pro-LTT diaspora in the Western countries as well as Malaysia, all over. We can't just ensure, just forget everything, do away with the PTA, or and just sleep. Then next time we don't know where it will end up. So therefore, if one feels that the PTA is too draconian, yes, but there must be something similar, like even what is there in the United States or United Kingdom.
The government of Sri Lanka had gone to Geneva and agreed to repeal the Prevention of Terrorism Act and replace it with anti-terrorism legislation. They have to repeal the PTA, and they are having number of people suffering in the jail without inquiry. And my learned friend is now talking of pro-LTT. Where is LTT? To have a pro-LTT, there must be LTT. Where is LTT? These are imagination. That is the thing that will be destroyed in this country.
The High Commissioner in Malaysia did not get assaulted just for nothing. There must be certain, there are violent elements.
That is different. LTT, you are saying pro-LTT.
Yes, so one of those people who supposed to have been accused was a suspect, LTT suspect who had been released from Sri Lankan jails.
Prime Minister of Sri Lanka denied that.
All right, I think on that note, we are going for a short commercial break. You're watching Face the Nation. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation live on TV1. And we move on to the final round now. Mr. Kandaya Neelakandan, your final question for tonight. We are moving towards a people's constitution. Do you think this is the right way forward?
When we say people's constitution, it must be the constitution of the peoples, not of the majority. That's the first point I want to make. It must be, I think, take into consideration the aspirations and sufferings of the Tamil people, Muslim people, and their provision has to be made so that all can live in this country with dignity, equality. And the imaginations were revert about the LTT and federalism is separation. All this should be misspelled, and people must be understood that you have to take the message to the innocent people in the rural areas, not to mislead. As the political leaders have been misleading the people and come into powers. So what I would appeal is to the educated leaders, educated religious leaders and politicians to take the message that let us live together, let us respect each other, let everybody in harmony, and not to rule only one party by army and to have freedom only one country, one part of the country. So let us, if we want to live together, let us have that, and let us live together on that basis.
So do you see a disconnect between the need for a constitution on the one hand and the day-to-day issues faced by the people of Sri Lanka, such as poverty and other sufferings?
I would say first priority should be given to take away the sufferings of the people and their ill feelings must be dispelled. At the same time, as a parallel, let us have a constitution, I said, giving the equality and the rights to everyone.
Are you optimistic about the new government's move to bring in a new constitution in Sri Lanka?
I am optimistic with what have been said by His Excellency the President and the Honorable Prime Minister, and also the honor that the Office for National Unity headed by Madam Sandrika Bandaranaike, with whom I have the pleasure of working. And it is in that believe only opposition leader Sambandanosa has appealed to Tamils to work, to work with understanding, and let us cooperate and get a satisfactory political solution.
Finally, sir, on the topic of reconciliation, what do we need to do right?
I will repeat, think that all the Tamils in this country are also citizens of this country with equal right, and they are not tigers.
Daham Bindu Heva, my final set of questions to you. You are also a member of the Liberal Party as well as an attorney at law. Do you think that moving towards a new constitution is the most pressing need of the hour, or do you think that the government has just got its priorities mixed up?
The government is running on a very new situation with a united government with UNP, SLFP, and to a certain extent, to get the two-third majority, they have to get the TNA or JVP considerations as well. So, as Mr. Neelakandan pointed out, I don't know whether the people's mandate will be in this constitution, but definitely all major parties' mandates and ideologies have to be heard in the Constituent Assembly and having all those things included in a new bill, forming a new constitution, that will go, certain aspects of that will go to a referendum. And in the referendum, the people have to be educated in advance of sensitive issues, and these sensitivities should be somehow told by all parties. Even the devolution should go hand in hand with reconciliation, because devolution being given without a reconciliation can create more problems. So it is not only the reconciliation between racial segments or ethnicities, it's also reconciliation in between the parties. The parties individually as UNP, JVP, SLFP, also parties maybe SLFP, one fraction, SLFP, other fraction. All these reconciliations should come together, otherwise there will be doubt created. You actually need only 3 people creating doubt syndromes on the public, which could stop this process, this step being taken. The government has a lot of issues, and we can't say whether they have mixed up priorities. The government has to work on their own survival and their party's survival. So we can't stop the government fractions doing what they want to survive in politics. We can't stop that also.
Are we on the right track? Are you optimistic?
Of course, yes.
Thank you very much. Finally, Mr. Kushan Diawis, President's Counsel and member of the Public Representations Committee on Constitutional Reform. Sir, you have been hands-on involved in this process in public representations on constitutional reform. You've traveled across the country, listened to people and their views. Do you see a disconnect between the people that you've talked to in the villages and in the towns and in this document itself? Do you think there's a disconnect between the constitution, the proposed constitution, and the views expressed by the people?
The proposed constitution, of course, is not out, so I can't comment on it, because what we have...
No, let me clarify the question, sir. Do you see a disconnect between the need for a constitution and the issues faced by the people as brought out to you and as reflected in this report?
Like I said earlier, the grievances were twofold. Basically, one of us was regarding the necessity of constitutional amendment or a new constitution. The other was, of course, the public grievances, which did not amount to, so I will not deal with that. But I do not see any disconnect in that way, because as far as the people were concerned...
So the views of the people of Sri Lanka are adequately represented in this document? Is that what you're saying?
Sonali, I would say this, as of the people who came forward and made representations. It would not be fair for me to say that, you know, that this report speaks for the entirety of, or, you know, of the people who came forward. We have done a very unbiased, honest dissection of the ideas they have given, and we have recommended them. We have not edited, we have not done anything. So therefore, so I have to limit it to the people, and we have given a schedule and the number of people who came forward, so, and their organizations.
Mr. Dialvis, finally, do you think, in your opinion, in your expert opinion, do you think that the masses of Sri Lanka are aware of the need for a new constitution? Are they aware of their rights under the existing constitution?
They are aware. I would say that you will be surprised. Actually, if you look at even the way the elections have been going and the election results, our people, the country, the general public is quite savvy. They know their rights. They know, so one cannot say that they are totally ignorant. They are quite.
My final question to you: are we on the right track, and are you optimistic that we can proceed on this path towards a brighter tomorrow?
Yes, I would say so, but of course we should proceed with caution. We must not allow us to be pushed into corners, as well as reconciliation is not a one-way street. It must be, you know, all stakeholders must come down halfway. It's not just one side giving and the other side taking, or you know, something like that. So we have to be careful on that, as well as my good friend said, that there's a lot of livelihood grievances. I would say that it would be prudent if we could address that also in a very progressive manner while this constitutional amendment is being pushed forward. That is why I always say that administratively a lot of these issues can be addressed rather than you know, big devolution of power, because I would say even in the northern province I feel that it is the politicians and the political elite who are making use of this situation. You know, the normal farmer, the normal villager, I think they have bigger problems, the livelihood problems.
But we are on the right track.
Yes.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Kandaya Neelakandan, a senior attorney at law and a luminary in the field of constitutional law as well, and also a board member of the Office for National Unity and Reconciliation, or ONUR. Thank you, sir, for joining us this evening. Also joining us was President's Counsel, Mr. Kushan Dialvis, member of the Public Representations Committee on Constitutional Reform. Thank you, sir. And finally, Daham Binduheva, attorney at law and also member of the Liberal Party. Thank you, Daham, for joining us tonight. On that note, we wrap up this edition of Face the Nation. Before you go, something that Albert Einstein once said: the strength of the Constitution lies entirely in the determination of each citizen to determine it. Only if each single citizen feels duty-bound to do his share in this defense are the constitutional rights secure. Thanks for joining us. Good night.